we are starting the conversation about the autonomic nervous system, and let me assure you that once I turn this equipment on, you will be able to see that. Okay? So this may be the most important chapter into ANPs, because 60 to 70% of the drugs that you're going to discuss in your future nursing classes will be about this, about autonomic nervous system. So let's compare some features of those two systems. So first, let's talk about differences between somatic and autonomic. So this is your somatic nervous system, right? Somatic responses. Look, this column represents the spinal cord. Okay, so this is spinal cord. So your motor neuron, its axon leaves the spinal cord. It's a single axon, and this axon reaches your muscle. And this is how it stimulates it. It stimulates it by releasing neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, and there are no exceptions from that rule. All your muscles receive the signal by acetylcholine. If you look at autonomic nervous system, it's different. First of all, there are two branches. There is a sympathetic branch and there's parasympathetic branch. While the bodies of those neurons are still located in the central nervous system, which can be spinal cord or, in this case, brain stem, okay, you can see that the whole path of signal from the CNS to the effectors takes two neurons, okay? Would you acknowledge that? Yes. And these neurons synapse in what's called a ganglion. So the neurons that are before the ganglion are called, very surprisingly, preganglionic. And the neurons that are after the ganglion are postganglionic. You can also see that compared to the somatic motor neurons, the visceral neurons are very poorly myelinated. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Okay? Because the signal that reaches your visceral organs doesn't have to reach them immediately. As time. The responses do not have to be in the split second. Okay? Another big difference between, well, obviously, the effectors are cardiac muscles, or glands, or smooth muscles, but different, greater variety of neurotransmitters. Okay? It can be norepinephrine or acetylcholine. And the effects are going to be, can be both stimulatory and inhibitory. Remember how we talked about skeletal muscles? And I told you that skeletal muscle can only be activated. Like if it's stimulated, it contracts. If it does not get stimulated, it relaxes. These guys can actually, like, there is a negative. There's an inhibition of the activities. So what is the difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic branches? Well, parasympathetic division is housekeeping. Sympathetic mobilizes your organs when you're particularly active. When you look at this image of these two systems, parasympathetic is sometimes named rest and digest, yes. And sympathetic is fight or flight. Now, when you look at these two systems, you can see that most organs are controlled by both. And for the most part, sympathetic and parasympathetic systems have opposite effects in a particular organ, but we will discuss it on a separate occasion, okay? Now, this double innervation is important because it allows your body functions to be executed smoothly. Not jumping from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds, but like smoothly going from 60 beats per minute to 120 when you exercise. So we're going to start with the parasympathetic system. Rest and digest. Usually compared to you being sitting in a chair reading a book, the activity that soon will be very much forgotten. You just had your lunch, okay? So your digestive system very actively breaks down nutrients, right? You don't need to race anywhere, so blood pressure and heart rate are normally low. Your respiratory system does not overwork. Your pupils are constricted and lenses accommodated for slow close. Basically, your eyes are good for reading, for anything up close. And you're going to poop and pee pretty soon. Okay? So, what is the origin of the preganglionic neurons of parasympathetic system? Brainstem and sacral region of the spinal cord. So let's take a look. So in this image you see, don't worry, it's much simpler than what you see. You see that there are 4 cranial nerves that carry parasympathetic fibers. And there are a couple of sacral nerves that also carry parasympathetic fibers. Okay? Now, what's important is that overcomplicated statement here. Axons synapse with postganglionic fibers in the terminal ganglia that are closer within the target organs. Let me give you a picture, all right? So this is something that I strongly encourage you to do. Just draw it from time to time. So this is your parasympathetic. So let's say this is brainstem. Or it can be sacral region of the spinal cord. It doesn't matter. Okay, so this is your preganglionic neuron. Okay, make sense? So it synapses with a postganglionic neuron. Which one is shorter? There you go. So in parasympathetic system, preganglionic neurons are long and postganglionic are short. And the structure here, which is a ganglion, is located in the wall of an organ. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. So this is the distinctive feature. Okay? So there you go. Post-ganglionic axons are very short.
Okay, I got a question.
Sure.
Rest and digest, how long does that take of a period? Because, like, what if you eating or you have your nutrition and you don't sit down? Or is your body
That's not a great idea, because if you don't sit down and start working out, right? Running around.
Because you know how people eat on the go, and they just eat.
That's not good. I do it all the time. That's not good. But we'll get to this. Just give me good maybe 5-10 minutes, and you will hear the answer to your question. I hope. So now let's talk in more details and about parasympathetic system. Just like I did with cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, I'm going to be highlighting specific information that I can ask you. Right now, if something is not highlighted, consider it FYI, not for the exam, for your information, okay? So, cranial nerves. Preganglionic fibers can be found in oculomotor, facial, glossopharyngeal, and vagus cranial nerves. Okay? So, let's start with cranial nerve 3, oculomotor. Here. Oculomotor nerve controls smooth muscles of the eye. What else does oculomotor nerve do? Oculomotor. Hold on. It does. Wait. Oculomotor nerve. Oculomotor. Responsible for what? The movement of eyes. Is it responsible for constriction? Yes. Is it responsible for accommodating you? You're absolutely correct. But here's the question. Movements of your eyes, are they voluntary? Yes. Your pupillary constriction, voluntary or not? No. And your adaptation to reading. So this is what it means to be autonomic. Okay? That makes sense? Facial nerve. Glands in the face. We talked about it. Nasal glands, snot. Lacrimal glands, that's tears. And 2 salivary glands. Clear? Did I highlight any locations for preganglionic bodies?
No.
What about postganglionic bodies? Will I ask those things? No, I will not. Then we have glossopharyngeal nerve. Glossopharyngeal nerve innervates the 3rd salivary gland. You can actually see it here. Check it out. So this is your cranial nerve 3, the oculomotor, and you see like that stuff goes to the eye, right? That's pupillary constriction. This is your cranial nerve 7, facial nerve, and that goes to submandibular glands, nasal mucosa, lacrimal gland. Then you have cranial nerve 9, which is glossopharyngeal parotid gland, and then we have a vagus nerve, which is not on this page because it is insane.
It's what?
It's insane. It's huge. Look at what it innervates. Your vagus nerve, check this out. Heart, lung, liver and the bladder, gallbladder, stomach, pancreas, and large intestine. Well, I usually put it this way. It controls thoracic and abdominal organs, period. Pelvic is the different story. Are we good so far? Yeah, excellent. Now, as you can see, just like spinal nerves, there are multiple plexuses. I highlight them. I'm not going to ask plexuses, to be honest, because many of them are kind of stupid. Like if I ask you cardiac plexus, what do you need it for? It's cardiac, right? Well, it's kind of, defeats the purpose. Am I making sense? Now, the last bit of nerves here are sacral nerves. So sacral nerves, 2, 3, and 4, They control genitalia, reproductive organs, and urinary bladder. Also, rectum. What's common between the rectum, the reproductive organs, the urinary bladder, and genitalia? If you would say location, pelvic region. Pelvic. They are at the bottom, right? All of them are in the pelvic cavity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we clear? So before we move on to sympathetic system, I want to highlight something for you folks. If you will go back and look at these controls, a lot of them are very, very precise, if you know what I mean. Like, just the parotid gland. It's super direct. Okay, we're going to compare this to your sympathetic system. So, sympathetic system is harder because it's bigger. Okay, so, origins, preganglionic fibers, thoracolumbar region. Okay, spinal cord from T1 to L2. Okay, so the bodies are in the lateral horns. And then check this out. There's a sympathetic trunk that goes, there are two sympathetic trunks on both sides of your spinal column. Do you see that chain here? I'm going to highlight it in a minute. This one. Okay? That's the sympathetic trunk. The green on the left. This one. Okay. So, this sometimes is called sympathetic chain of ganglia or paravertebral chain of ganglia. My point here is to illustrate that the ganglia, unlike in parasympathetic system, sympathetic ganglia are located very close to the origin. Okay? So, why? We're going to produce the same drawing as we did for parasympathetic system, okay? So this is sympathetic organization. Here you have spinal cord. So far, everybody, you with me? So this is your, a little shorter. This is your preganglionic neuron. Okay? Sounds good? So it forms a synapse with a post-ganglionic neuron. Okay? Which one is longer? So now this, right here, the place where the ganglion is, so that is sympathetic trunk. We're doing all right so far? Okay. So preganglionic fiber is a short, postganglionic a long. Opposite to what parasympathetic system has. Okay. Question? I can return it. Do you want me to go back?
Yes, right.
Sure, no. Yeah? Okay. So, it's just a structural difference, like seriously. But the presence of that sympathetic trunk, okay, we can move on. The presence of that sympathetic trunk actually explains a lot of physiology of the sympathetic nervous system. So let's take a look at this image. I'm so happy that I can use it now because it's much easier not to draw it myself. Okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to try and trace axons, right? All right, we're good. So number one here. Let me just change the color. So this guy, this neuron originates in the spinal cord, in the lateral horn, goes into the ventral root of the spinal nerve, and then leaves the spinal nerve and enters that chain of ganglia. Am I making sense? We're going to use the thinner one. Okay, so here it is. Goes, it goes, it goes, it goes, and finally hits that ganglion within the chain, within the trunk, right? So you see that when it leaves the spinal cord, it leaves through the little structure. It's a branch. It's called white ramus communicans. So ramus is a branch. It's a communicating branch. Why is it white? Myelin. Preganglionic fibers are myelinated. Okay? Look what happens next. It forms a synapse with postganglionic neuron, which gets out and about. So you can see that preganglionic fiber in nature is very short, because all it needs to connect is the spinal cord and the chain of ganglia. Am I making sense? Postganglionic fiber is super long, because it goes all the way to an organ. Now, postganglionic fibers are not really myelinated, so they leave through the gray ramus communicans. Now, that first case with the synapse at the same level, does it make sense to you all? No? Yes? Okay. Not sure? Anyone works at clinic? Cleveland Clinic? Yeah? You have? No? It's fine. Have you been there? Yeah. So, you know there's tunnels, the walking bridges between the buildings. Yeah? So imagine that you get off the elevator on the same level as the bridge, and you just walk through the bridge. That's what I mean by the same level. So it is T4, and it goes as T4, like keeps going. Now, what is the alternative? Look, preganglionic fiber enters the chain of ganglia and goes up. Or down. So you enter, like, in order to get to that bridge, you enter the building at the first floor, and to get to the bridge, you need to take an elevator and get on the third. Or maybe you need to go in the basement, like, it can go down, but the point is it goes to a different level. Make sense? So that synapse can happen at the same or different level. Or it can happen in so-called collateral ganglia or peripheral ganglia. So look what happens. Your preganglionic fiber bypasses the trunk and forms the synapse somewhere in the body periphery. So to summarize, you can have synapsing at the same level, synapsing at a different level, and synapsing in the periphery. We good so far? Okay.
Why did you say it's an example
Wait. Oh, the name of the ganglion, celiac ganglion. It's one of the peripheral ganglions. Okay, now I went a little bit berserk on the data in this table. So here's what you can expect from me on that stuff. The material that we just discussed shows you that sympathetic system it branches a lot. So if you look at this scheme, you can see that easily the preganglionic fibers from T1 can go all the way up the paravertebral, the sympathetic trunk, and innervate eyes, or they can go down or synapse at the same level, and they can, fibers that originate at one level can innervate eyes or heart. Make sense? But there is some kind of a propensity. So, hear me out. If you look at what preganglionic fibers that originate at the very top of the thoracic region, what they innervate, I'm not going to read this for you. Okay? But it's mostly stuff in your head. Salivary glands, nasal glands, lacrimal glands, and so on. Make sense? Now, when you extend it to 6, we're talking thoracic organs. Okay? Folks, I don't want to confuse you. Please do not highlight it. I will explain what type of question I can ask. Okay? It's not that let me explain. Let me just finish it. And then you look at like T5L2 or T10L2. Those guys innervate something in the abdomen or in the pelvis. Am I making sense? So what question you can expect? Preganglionic fibers that originate in the region T1 will most likely send sympathetic signals to options: eyes, lungs, stomach, intestine. Eyes, because it's here. So I'm going to give you something very discriminative. I want to ensure that you understand how system works. I have no intention of making you memorizing all this word salad. Okay? So, what causes sympathetic activation? Excitement of any sort. It can be positive excitement. It can be exercise. It can be negative excitement. And, we're being attacked by a rabid raccoon. Okay? So, basically, it mobilizes all your organs. In other words, that illustrates it perfectly. Sympathetic activation of Hulk results in Chuck Norris. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on what specifically happens to each organ. Instead, I'm going to summarize the comparison, and then we're going to hit neurotransmitters and physiological effects. How about that? So, this table serves as a comparison. I'm not asking you can memorize this table, fine with me. I'm going to highlight what I think is the most important, keywords here. Origin, craniosacral versus thoracolumbar. You absolutely must know which cranial nerves carry parasympathetic fibers. 3, 7, 9, 10. And the names. Sounds good? Cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10. You must know that oculomotor, facial, glossopharyngeal, and vagus all carry parasympathetic fibers. Clear? Okay. Location of ganglia. Close to the organ or in the organ wall. In case of parasympathetic, in the sympathetic, sympathetic trunk. Relative length, we mentioned it a gazillion times. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Degree of branching, very important. You can see that sympathetic system branches much more extensively than parasympathetic. Keep this thought on the back burner. It will become very important soon. Functional role. And I'm not going to touch on neurotransmitters because that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. So, again? Yeah. So, just like somatic system, just like skeletal muscles, your autonomic nervous system controls your body activity through reflexes. As a matter of fact, you have very little control over your body. Okay? Example of such reflex is a baroreceptor reflex, shown here on the right. So let's say your blood pressure decreases. Okay? That makes sense? You have baroreceptors in aorta and carotid sinuses, which sense the reduced pressure, send the signals to this part of the brainstem. Can anyone tell me what is this?
What?
Part of the brainstem that I'm trying to highlight. Huh? Medulla. Yes, that's medulla. Medulla forms outputs. And remember, they can be excitatory, they can be inhibitory. If your blood pressure goes down, you need to bring it back up. So parasympathetic fibers send inhibitory signals to the center, so they become dysfunctional. While sympathetic fibers start stimulating your cardiac muscle and it contracts faster. Make sense? Okay. So now let's talk about the receptors and the neurotransmitters. I am highlighting the concepts that I will ask. There are a couple of oddballs. I'm going to tell about them. I'm not going to ask about them. So the very first one here, all parasympathetic chains of neurons are the same. Preganglionic fiber releases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. Can you see that? Postganglionic fiber also releases acetylcholine. The difference? Different receptors. Nicotinic receptor on postganglionic fiber and the muscarinic receptor on the organ. Believe me, we're going to go over it at least once again when we get to mimetics and stuff. So far, are you with me? Then we have sympathetics. So the sympathetics that I want you to know are these. So preganglionic fiber also releases acetylcholine, just like the parasympathetic. But postganglionic fibers release norepinephrine, which acts on adrenergic receptors. Does that make sense? We're going to do the summary. We're going to do at least once, maybe more. And another one which is really interesting is your adrenal medulla, part of your adrenal gland. So check this out. Preganglionic fiber releases acetylcholine. It interacts with nicotinic receptor. And then special cells in the medulla called neuroendocrine cells produce epinephrine and norepinephrine. The only difference, they release it in blood. So this bottom one looks like one, basically you have a list of possible combinations, right? So bottom combination, what does it look like? What is it similar to? out of all other combinations? Not the top one. The second one. Neurotransmitters are the same, right? That makes sense? So adrenal medulla is stimulated by sympathetic system. And this blue cells, this blue arrow effectively, it represents transformed the neurons. It's called neuroendocrine cells. Instead of sending those neurotransmitters to a specific target, they just release it in the blood and they go everywhere. So receptors that respond to acetylcholine stimulation are called cholinergic. Okay? It can be nicotinic, they can be muscarinic. Okay, makes sense? And I absolutely love this illustration. Check this out. So this is nicotinic receptors. Go ahead and enlarge it. Do you see the receptor shown in as this little dip in the bottom? Yeah? See that? And then you have three molecules here: muscarine, acetylcholine, and nicotine. Which of these three molecules will fit the receptor the best? Based on the picture. Nope. Nicotine. The bottom one, right? It's a nicotine. That part. Muscarine will actually be the worst. Acetylcholine will be okay. If you look at the top picture at muscarinic receptors, now muscarine fits best. Nicotine fits worst. ACH, kind of okay. That makes sense? So ACH is kind of a jack of all trades. But this is the neurotransmitter that we produce normally. What if I give you the compound called muscarine? Will it act on muscarinic receptors? Will it stimulate them more than acetylcholine?
Yeah.
Do you remember what we call such molecules? Agonists. So muscarine is the agonist of muscarinic receptor. Nicotine is the agonist of nicotinic receptor. Yeah. Cigarettes, lozenges, whatever people get nicotine fix from. Okay? Now, this is cholinergic. When you start looking at this old-ass image, because it still uses adrenaline and noradrenaline, so the current terminology is, don't ask me why they changed it. I have no idea. I don't know why adrenaline was so bad. So now, adrenaline is norepinephrine, and noradrenaline is epinephrine. Sounds good? So they bind to adrenergic receptors. There are two types, alpha and beta. And within each group, there are two types of beta adrenergics and three types of alphas. Do you need to know the function of each individual type, like beta 1 or alpha 2? No. I want you to understand another thing very important. So depending on which receptor types and in which ratio you find in a particular organ, that will determine how the organ responds to the stimulation to the epinephrine. Let's say you only have inhibitory receptors, okay? It means that norepinephrine will inhibit that organ. Or you have a bunch of excitatory receptors, will excite the organ. Making sense? Now, this is the comparison. Again, a comparison. It is helpful to use this table to check your knowledge of where they are located. So nicotinic receptors, where are they? All postganglionic neurons in all systems, period. Muscarinic receptors target parasympathetic targets. Okay? Are they present on some sympathetics? Yes, like sweat glands. But it's a small exception. I'm not even like, it's never going to be on the exam. Adrenergic. The only thing I'm not going to read the table for you. What I want to highlight, look at this. Beta 1 increases heart rate. Okay? Beta 2, relaxation. Dilates blood vessels, relaxes uterus, relaxes digestive and urinary organs. Okay? So, just know effects can be excitatory, can be inhibitory, depending on the ratio of receptors. You will see different effects. So far, questions? Agonists versus antagonists. So classic agonist of nicotinic receptors is a nicotine. Okay? Is nicotine bad?
Yes.
Not really. The dose makes the poison.
The what?
The dose makes the poison.
The dose.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you decide to buy a pack of nicotine gum and go through the entire pack in 2 hours, I want to see it. I just want to be far from you, but I want to see it. So you're probably going to be shitting yourself. Okay?
Really?
Yeah, because it's a drug. Is it addictive drug? Yes. Many other drugs are addictive. Is it a stimulant? Yes. And I know people who, when they have to do a lot of mental work, they don't smoke, but they would buy a nicotine patch, slap it, because it really stimulates your cognition. It causes addiction as well. So that's a different story. But and compared to other, it's pretty addictive, but it's not intrinsically bad for you in a way that, oh, it's going to cause a heart attack. Okay? And it doesn't cause cancer. People who smoke have cancer for different reasons. Okay, does that make sense? Now, general agonists of muscarinic receptors, they called parasympathomimetic. I don't think parasympatho requires any explanation, right? Mimetic. What does the word mimicking mean? Copy. So parasympathomimetics copy the actions of muscarine. Clear? Example, bethanicol. Some people, after anesthesia, general anesthesia, sometimes have real difficulty, evacuating urine. So bethanicol helps to relax the urinary sphincter and contract the bladder. Okay, make sense? I'm not competent to answer or comment on this. Now, what about parasympatholytics? Well, we'll get to parasympathetic. I am not aware of any direct inhibitors of parasympathetic receptors, of nicotinic receptors, but we have sort of indirect inhibitors. Remember that acetylcholine is eliminated by the enzyme acetylcholinesterase. If you inhibit that enzyme, you inhibit the breakdown of acetylcholine, and the signal persists. Okay, it's kind of indirect agonists. So that's neostigmine, which is a treatment for autoimmune disease, myasthenia gravis. Don't memorize examples. I highlight examples just. And sarin, chemical warfare. right? Now, sympathetic system. Now we introduce the term of sympathomimetics and sympatholytics. So sympathomimetic agent act on, stimulate the receptors, right? Agonists of adrenergic receptors. Albuterol. Those of you who have asthma knows what I'm talking about. Phenylephrine. Do you know what it does? Well, kind of written there. It's nasal decongestant, and I will explain the mechanism. Just keep in mind that phenylephrine is sympathomimetic agonist of sympathetic receptors. And then you have sympatholytic agents, such as propranolol, which is useful for treatment of hypertension. This is the beta blocker. Okay, am I making sense in this case? Okay. Now, let me explain, first of all, what I'm going to give you an illustration, and we're also going to practice what you can expect, sort of type of question. Okay, just slide it to the left. And let's see what colors I can produce. Well, we're going to start with this. So these are your neurons, okay? We're going to go. This is a really good practice, so I highly encourage you to draw with me. Okay? So this is your sympathetic system, and this is your parasympathetic. So first of all, length. Sympathetic, the preganglionic fiber, short or long? Sympathetic, short. Postganglionic, long. Parasympathetic, the opposite. Sounds good? So now the location for sympathetic, where is it? Where do they start? Preganglionic fibers of sympathetic, huh? Which organ? Like, where do they originate? Spinal cord. Spinal cord, T1, L2. Parasympathetic, cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, 10, and sacral nerves. Sacral region, not nerves. Sacral spinal cord. Okay, so far we good? Ganglia. Ganglia, where? Over the image, yes, but which anatomical structure? Remember sympathetic trunk? That's what I'm asking. Okay, sympathetic trunk, remember that. What about this? It's long, it goes all of organ. Thank you. So now let's take a look at neurotransmitters. Okay? So neurotransmitters, free ganglionic fibers, what do they release? What neurotransmitter? Acetylcholine. Right? All of them. And postganglionic fibers in parasympathetic also acetylcholine. Okay? What about postganglionic fibers of sympathetic? What do they release? That's your norepinephrine. Very good. Excellent. Now they have to act on the receptors, right? So the receptors that your acetylcholine acts on that will be nicotinic receptor, okay? So you can see this is like, if you have this scheme in front of you, you're going to be answering questions like crazy. Seriously. Like you just have everything drawn out. Okay? Now, what about the receptors for the same, the acetylcholine, but in the organ? So these are muscarinic receptors. Okay? And finally, what about receptors for norepinephrine? That's going to be adrenergic receptors. Okay? So here's my question. If I want to stimulate parasympathetic activities only, the agonist of which receptor should I use? If I want to stimulate exclusively parasympathetic activity, agonist of which receptor should I use? Which receptor should I stimulate very specifically? But which receptor? There are two receptors for not neurotransmitter, the receptor for neurotransmitter. Huh? Say again?
Acetylcholine.
Again?
That's what she was trying to say.
Which one?
Acetylcholine.
Yes, but it's a neurotransmitter. I'm asking about the receptor. Because if you just... Say again? Nope. Because nicotinic is present in both. I want specifically stimulate parasympathetic. It's got to be muscarinic, right? Yes. Because if you will stimulate nicotinic, it will stimulate sympathetic and parasympathetic effects both. Okay? What do you need to inhibit parasympathetic specifically? Which receptor do you need to inhibit? Also muscarinic, right? Because if you block nicotinic, you hit both systems. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And analogously, beta-adrenergic receptors are targets for messing up around with the sympathetic system. Am I clear? So, whatever stimulates muscarinic receptor is parasympathomimetic. Whatever blocks is what? Parasympatholytic. Whatever stimulates adrenergic receptors is a sympathomimetic. And if it inhibits adrenergic receptors or blocks them, it is sympatholytic. You have to be comfortable with these terms. I will use them in the questions, and I will not tell them what they mean during the exam.
Okay, can you repeat that?
I'm going to make your and my life much easier. Hold on a second. Oh, for Christ's sake. This. What is a sympatholytic? What is a sympathomimetic? What is a parasympathomimetic? And what is the, conceptually, parasympatholytic? Okay? We're good? Moving on. So now, here's the thing. I'm going to focus on some things, but not all things. Most things, okay? We're almost done. What I'm going to do, we're going to run through each organ and compare the effects. Keep in mind, parasympathetic is rest and digest. Sympathetic is fight or flight. So the effects must make sense. Eye, the iris, the pupil. Parasympathetic. Pupillary constriction. Now take highlighting very seriously. Sympathetic dilates. When you seeing a person that you like seriously like, maybe not even as a friend, are you excited? Yes. Your pupils dilate. Okay? And when you see a person that you absolutely despise, they constrict. Ciliary muscle. In other words, vision, close or far. I'm highlighting exactly the information that I can ask you. We didn't talk about like dilator pupillae, screw that. Okay? Close vision, parasympathetic, far vision, sympathetic. Glands. Parasympathetic stimulates, sympathetic inhibits. And here I present the case for you folks. I have two clinical examples. When you eating, what happens to the amount of saliva that you produce? So rest and digest. Now imagine, I bet you all absolutely love public speaking. Yeah, your mouth gets dry because you are in the sympathetic fight or flight mode, which inhibits salivation. Here's an example of the agonist. Remember we were talking about phenylephrine?
Yes.
The drug, anti-congestive drug, yes? So it's the agonist of adrenergic receptors. When you take phenylephrine, it acts on the adrenergic receptors in your nasal glands and reduces the amount of mucus that they produce. You have less congestion. When you exercise, do you feel good?
Yes.
Generally, yeah. Part of it is epinephrine. It's a feel-good neurotransmitter, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So now hear me out. If phenylephrine has effects similar to norepinephrine, what would people use it for? To get high. It's a recreational drug.
Oh, is that why they be puffing canisters?
No, just drinking or taking pills. It kills the liver eventually, but yeah. And another, if you think about side effect, when you fight or flight, what happens to your heart rate? If you OD on norepinephrine, your heart's going to be racing. Okay? Salivary glands, okay. Salivary glands, yes. Sweat glands, only thing that you need to know. Look at this. Sweat glands are stimulated exclusively by sympathetic system. Okay? Adrenal medulla. Parasympathetic has no effect. Sympathetic stimulates the secretion of epinephrine and norepinephrine in the blood. In your body, the blood goes where? One word answer. Say again? In your body, one word. The blood goes where? Everywhere. So this way, sympathetic responses are much more systemic. Okay? There is another reason to this. If you go back, we're not going back, but if you go back and look at the anatomical comparison between sympathetic and parasympathetic system is very focused. It targets. Sympathetic system is super branched. So the effects are very systemic and very diffuse. When I rest and digest, you don't really I can go from rest and digest to fight or flight in a second. Now imagine you go, you drive and there's some bad situation on the road and you barely avoid collision. That's your fight or flight. Your heart is still going to be racing for a while. Okay? Goosebumps, whatever. I don't care about goosebumps. Heart. Okay. Parasympathetic slows it down. Sympathetic speeds it up. One more thing. Sympathetic speeds it up. And also, do you see that statement? Force of heartbeat. How hard the contraction is. Only sympathetic doesn't. Parasympathetic only regulates heart rate. Good? You don't need to know coronary blood vessels. Urinary bladder promotes voiding by parasympathetic. Sympathetic inhibits voiding. One of my stories, which is, I don't really care, but I was doing a long race, and mile 5, I wanted to pee. Remember, I'm in the race, my sympathetic system is stimulated. I finished the race in like 3 more hours, optimistically, and went to pee. That's it. My sympathetic system just blocked it.
Yeah.
Said, no, dude, you don't need to. Okay? Lungs. Constricts bronchioles by sympathetic, which, hear me out, makes sense, right? You don't need as much air. In case of sympathetic stimulation, it dilates bronchioles. You need a lot of air to run away or chase future food, okay? I'm going to ask you a trick question. So, smooth muscles, they control constriction and dilation of bronchioles. I'm not going to draw anything. When your bronchioles, I'm kind of giving you a hint, but when your bronchioles constrict, but when they constrict, the smooth muscle within the walls, is it stimulated or inhibited? Yes, exactly, very good. And when they dilate because the muscle relaxes, because it's inhibited, which often goes, oh, if they become wider, the muscle must do something. No, it doesn't. The muscle does only for constriction. Every time you see a constriction, it's an activation of a smooth muscle. Digestive organs are boring. Parasympathetic stimulates digestion, sympathetic decreases the digestion. Liver, no question about, well, actually yes. Yes question. Liver, parasympathetic takes glucose out of the blood. Sympathetic stimulates the release of glucose into the blood, which also makes sense. Okay? Because when you are in the fight or flight mode, you need resources. You need glucose. Gallbladder, just like any digestive excites, inhibits. No questions on kidneys. No questions on kidneys. Blood vessels. Mostly sympathetic, generally vasoconstriction. And these guys, so coagulation, increased cellular metabolism, and breakdown of fat are all sympathetic effects. Okay? Sounds good? Now, an interesting mechanism is the interesting way is how these systems operate for reproductive function. They both require it. So first there's a parasympathetic stimulation. And if you think about the process of human copulation, it kind of both, you have to be chill, but you also have to be moderately excited, right, about the process. So the chill part, parasympathetic stimulation, dilates blood vessels. It causes the release of nitric oxide, which dilates blood vessels. If those blood vessels are in penis, there is an erection. Okay? That makes sense? If those blood vessels in the homologous organ to penis and clitoris engorges. And then there's sympathetic stimulation, which stimulates contractions of ejaculatory duct, and that causes ejaculation. In females, it stimulates vaginal contractions, which are important to sort of help sperm to get where it needs to go. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, we actually covered that. So, uniquely, things to know about uniquely sympathetic responses. I'm going to highlight them. Sweating. Increase of metabolic rate, increase the blood glucose, breakdown of fat. Sounds good? And this brings us, I went completely bananas here. So, okay. Got it. Okay. Highlights. Takeaway is that hypothalamus is the boss. Hypothalamus is the boss of your sympathetic, parasympathetic. Okay? It is a part of the limbic system, so it is connected to your emotions. Right? It's one thing to see someone you really, really like. You're going to be excited. Another thing is to almost be in an accident. You're also going to be excited, but slightly different type of activation. So that's why emotional responses trigger some of the sympathetic, parasympathetic stuff. So I'm going to skip on biofeedback. There will be no questions. I'm going to focus on this. Acquired ANS disease. So hear me out. You are working as a trader at New York Stock Exchange. You moved hundreds of millions of dollars in a split second, and you have to make those decisions very fast. Is it a stressful job?
Yes.
Very much so. So this constant stress puts you in a constant fight or flight. Agreed?
Yes.
In a constant fight or flight, you constantly have elevated blood pressure. Elevated blood pressure, without any details, I'm going to tell you, it causes changes to your blood vessels, making them more stiff, which means your high blood pressure is with you forever. That's it. You have hypertension. And then during, huh?
Can't get rid of hypertension.
What if it's structural? No. You're done. Like your vessels remodeled in a way that you have hypertension. There are ways to manage it, but in addition, during stress, those people have elevated blood glucose. When you have blood glucose constantly elevated, what do you develop? Type 2 diabetes. First-hand account it's not first. So a buddy of mine worked at New York Stock Exchange as an IT specialist, and he knew quite a few of those traders. They retire very early, usually getting all those diseases in a span of about 5 to 7 years of active trading. Huh?
I can believe it.
Yeah. They filthy rich.
But trading is a very
Yeah.
stressful job.
So, couple of conditions associated with autonomic nervous system. We're going to go over this and call it a day, but at least we're going to be finished. Raynaud's disease. Nobody really understands why. It's basically sympathetic dysreflexia. You see these fingers? Like that, those images on the left of my highlight. The peripheral vessels constrict abnormally and remain constricted, so there is no blood flow to the tissues.
Oh, that's why they're in different colors?
Yeah. The trigger is usually cold. One of my colleagues at Lakeland has Raynaud's, and she wears gloves with electric heat pads if the class is too cold, because it triggers the constriction of peripheral nerves. And then this autonomic dysreflexia, which is a very interesting condition, and I now realize I don't do justice to this condition in full. So this is an example of autonomic dysreflexia in patients with a spinal cord injury. Usually it's a temperature triggered, and usually it's a temperature lower than a certain threshold. When they are in that temperature, they have massive vasodilation above the injury and massive vasoconstriction below the injury. Can you see that? So they get flushed on top, and they get really cold on the bottom. one of my buddies who was quadriplegic, he served in Navy as the Navy, like, underwater, like, diver. He knew how to swim. And I would tell him, let's go to the pool and, hang out. And he goes, it's too cold for me. Experimentally, he figured that if he swims in the water that has a temperature below 82 Fahrenheit, he gets autonomic dysreflexia. This condition is wider than just for people with the spinal cord injury. There's plenty of evidence that people who suffer from long COVID develop autonomic dysreflexia, which may include like flushes or jumps in the blood pressure, so not the most pleasant thing to have. Okay? So this concludes our conversation for this third unit. We're going to start special senses on Wednesday. This is the last bit of information that can be an exam on Monday.